catch a seal weighing 100 kilograms without a boat, without a gun, and almost silently, I stepped out onto the ice to find out. What the Inuit showed me didn't match my expectations at all, but it actually works. This is exactly how they feed their families. I was so cold that I lost all feeling in my toes as I trekked behind the hunters across the endless ice. What amazed me most was how they managed to find the seals at all. At the same time, they weren't actually looking for the animals themselves. The experienced hunter said we were looking for an opening and pointed to the ice. I didn't understand anything until he brushed away the snow and showed me a hole the size of a fist. It was a tiny hole. Those are breathing holes, where seals surface for air by breaking through the thick ice. Without them, they would simply drown. Finding these holes is incredibly difficult. They are almost invisible against the vast white landscape. I stared intensely at the endless snowy horizon but saw nothing. Yet the hunters recognized them instantly. They pointed at a patch of ice that looked perfectly ordinary and said there was an igloo there. I complained that I'd been keeping my eyes glued to the ground for an hour, but all I could see was ice and snow. They only smiled. Perhaps anyone they had ever guided before said the exact same thing. As I began to observe more closely, I gradually realized exactly what they were looking at. The ice around the breathing hole appeared slightly different. At the point where the seal's warm breath met the freezing air, the surface of the ice would change. Sometimes you might notice a tiny ridge rising above the snow, or a very subtle shift in color. The hunters even used their bare hands to touch the ice. Right at the location of the breathing hole, they could feel a faint warmth radiating outward. One of them explained that seals are very intelligent. Within its territory, a seal creates between 5 to 7 such breathing holes. If a polar bear discovers one, the seal will simply escape through another. Finally, I cried out, thinking I had found a breathing hole, and excitedly pointed down at the ice. The hunter approached, inspected it, and shook his head. He said it was just a crack in the ice. After my third unsuccessful attempt, one of the hunters suddenly knelt down at a spot I would never have noticed. He nodded to the others. A fresh breathing hole, one that had just been used. And the waiting. We had to lie motionless and wait until the seal surfaced at the breathing hole to take a gulp of air. As soon as they found the hole, the hunters immediately shifted to another vital skill, the skill of listening. No one told me to be quiet. They simply fell silent. The space became so still that I could hear my own heart beating. The elder hunter lay down on the ice and pressed his ear right next to the breathing hole. He lay perfectly still, as silent as a statue. The remaining hunters also lay down beside the breathing holes they had found nearby, maintaining the same posture. I tried to follow their lead, pressing my ear against the snow and beginning to listen. At first, there was nothing, only the sound of the wind blowing. Then I caught an extremely faint sound, like tiny air bubbles rising and bursting on the surface of the water. The hunter next to me gave a small nod. That was exactly the sound they had been waiting for. Later, they told me that a seal can stay underwater for about 15 minutes. When it surfaces at the breathing hole, it only takes 1 or 2 quick breaths and dives back down immediately. If you miss that moment, you will have to wait another hour, or perhaps even longer. My patience ran out after exactly 5 minutes and 23 seconds. I know that exact number because I glanced at my watch every 15 seconds. Perhaps that was precisely why no seal bothered to swim toward me. In stark contrast, the hunters did not budge at all. Over an hour passed and they remained just as still. Not once did they change their posture, not a single small movement, nor any sign of fatigue. No conversation and no hint of boredom. There was only absolute focus. According to scientists, expert hunters are capable of hearing a seal approaching from depths of up to 9 meters. Furthermore, they can distinguish between different seal species based solely on their breathing. For instance, a ringed seal breathes quite differently from a bearded seal. I was ready to give up. My muscles ached from the cold, the tension, and from lying motionless for so long. I was just about to stand up, thinking to myself that this hunt was a failure. And at that very moment, a splash rang out. Then came a gentle exhale. A sound, distinct and clear, emerged from the breathing hole where the lead hunter was lying. Everything around us instantly sprang to life. All the hunters braced themselves, as taut as a plucked string. I, too, froze in my tracks. The hunter's hand gripped the handle of his weapon firmly. Previously, I had hardly noticed his strange three-pronged spear, but now, as he prepared to strike, I understood exactly what it was for. This weapon was created for one purpose and one purpose alone. The sound of splashing and breathing rang out once more. It was the signal that the time had come to act. Throughout the entire wait, the lead hunter had been holding a traditional spear known as a kakivak. At first glance, it looks like an ordinary trident with a long wooden shaft and 3 sharp prongs at the tip. However, this is not merely a spear. It is a tool honed over thousands of years of Arctic survival. The structure of the kakivak features a central prong, which is designed to pierce directly into the seal's body. The 2 side prongs, with barbs pointing backward, allow the spear to enter easily but make it nearly impossible for the seal to struggle free. He was preparing to deliver a single, precise, and lightning-fast strike. When hunting through the ice, you have only one chance. If you miss, the seal will vanish and might not return to this breathing hole for another hour, or even an entire day. The hunters recounted that young Inuit men often practice this strike by throwing stones into the water and trying to spear them with absolute precision. If you miss more than once in 10 attempts, you risk going hungry. If you miss a real seal, then hunger is inevitable. This was truly an extreme sniper shot aimed at a moving target. And then the moment arrived. Everything happened so fast that I didn't even have time to react. The hunter's arm struck down with immense force, driving the kakivak through the water beneath the ice. Water splashed upward as he gave the shaft a slight twist to ensure the barbs were firmly embedded in the prey. There were no shouts, no chaotic movements. Everything occurred in silence. The kakivak was crafted from caribou antlers or walrus bone. All parts were bound together with animal sinew and meticulously honed for durability. Today, some hunters have switched to metal spearheads, but essentially its structure has remained virtually unchanged for hundreds of years. Spearing the seal was only half the job. If the animal wasn't held firmly, it could struggle free and drag the entire spear beneath the ice. Even a perfect strike becomes meaningless if you cannot haul the prize back up. At that moment, the second hunter reached for a strange object that looked like a wrinkled leather bag. It brought to mind a deflated balloon. This was a weapon just as vital as the spear itself. The hunter holding the spear ordered us to move faster while never loosening his grip for a second. The other hunter pulled out the leather bag. As it turned out, it wasn't an ordinary bag at all, but an avatark. This is a specialized float made from dried sealskin. The second hunter used sinew cord to lash the avatark to the shaft of the kakivak, while the first hunter continued to hold fast to the spear embedded deep in the seal's body. The speared seal was struggling violently to escape. An animal can weigh over 90 kilograms, and in its panic, it possesses enough strength to wrench even the sturdiest spear right out of a hunter's hands. At that moment, the hunter brought the avatark to his mouth and quickly blew it up to the size of a basketball. Then he twisted the neck of the bag and secured it with a bone peg. Now that the float was firmly attached to the spear, the hunters could relax their grip slightly, as there was no longer any way for the seal to dive deep beneath the ice. The airbag held the animal steady like a lifebuoy on the water's surface. I asked if there was anything I could do to help. One of the hunters solemnly handed me the end of a rope. I pulled hard, only to realize that the rope wasn't attached to anything at all. They all burst out laughing. He explained that it was the first job of a hunting trip, and the others chuckled with genuine delight. Now, with the seal held fast by both the spear and the float, the hunters gathered around the breathing hole. It was caught. However, another difficult task lay ahead. The hole in the ice was only about 20 centimeters wide, while the seal weighed nearly 100 kilograms. The hunters began to widen the opening. The lead hunter pulled out a tool that looked like a cross between an ice axe and a chisel. He worked swiftly and with full confidence. Sharp, rhythmic blows followed one after another, sending shards of ice flying in every direction. In the past, this tool was crafted from caribou antlers or walrus tusks, materials incredibly durable and strong enough to pierce through ice up to 3 meters thick. Nowadays, the tool is made of metal, but its shape and operating principle remain exactly as they were. While one hunter widened the hole, the others prepared a rope made of braided sealskin. One end of the rope was tied firmly around the shaft of the kakivak. This method allowed the hunters to haul the prey up much more conveniently. One of them said it was now my turn and handed me the rope. I grabbed it with all the enthusiasm I could muster. I was certain that my gym sessions back home would give me an advantage. However, after only half a minute, my hands were burning, my back was aching, and the seal had barely budged an inch. As the 3 hunters combined their efforts, the seal finally began to yield. Its massive body slowly emerged from beneath the breathing hole. Water spilled over the edges of the breathing hole, and the animal finally lay on the ice. It was an astonishing sight, yet none of the hunters showed any signs of overexcitement. No one raised their hands in celebration or cheered enthusiastically. The seal had reached the surface, but the work was just beginning. One hunter let out a soft whistle, the sound echoing across the frozen landscape. Just a few minutes later, an Inuit dog sled team appeared in the distance. They were pulling wooden sleds, known here as kamutiks. This is a traditional Arctic means of transport, proven over thousands of years. Once the seal was securely fastened, the hunters walked alongside the sled, instead of sitting on it. Even with a team of 8 incredibly strong dogs, they believed that adding their own body weight to the sled was an unnecessary burden. As we reached the outskirts of the village, I noticed figures flickering near one of the houses. People began to gather there, as if they had already sensed the success of the hunt. The hunters cleared a space on the ice and produced a curved knife, unlike any I had ever seen before. The next phase began butchering and turning the prize into food. The hunters worked quickly, but with immense care, for here, haste is never permitted. The curved knife I had noticed earlier was an ulu, a traditional tool with a semicircular blade and a handle positioned directly on top. These knives are passed down from generation to generation within families. Thanks to its unique shape, the ulu cuts with a rocking motion, making it far more efficient than a straight knife when butchering large carcasses. The hunter carefully slit the seal's belly, and the skin was peeled back in one large, nearly undamaged piece. It was meticulously separated from the thick layer of blubber beneath. Nothing was thrown away. The skin would later be cleaned and used to make clothing, belts, or hunting tools. Next came the blubber, a layer up to 10 centimeters thick that keeps the seal warm in icy waters. This is one of the most calorie-rich food sources in the Arctic nature, especially during the winter months. The hunters cut the fat into large slabs, skillfully separating it from the meat. Feeling awkward, I stepped back and accidentally trod on a small piece of meat. The lead hunter looked at me, then looked down at my foot. He calmly said there was nothing to worry about, and that they had actually intended to soften that spot anyway. The others erupted in laughter, while I hurriedly stepped aside. The internal organs, such as the liver, heart, and kidneys, were removed intact. They were carefully inspected and set aside for different purposes. Not a single thing was wasted. Even the blood was collected into separate containers to make traditional soup. And what amazed me most was the cleanliness of it all. Everything took place right on the snow, without tables or specialized equipment, yet there was almost no mess at all. It was clear that these men had performed this task thousands of times. Once the butchering was nearly complete, they began to arrange the meat into small, neat piles. A portion of the meat was kept for immediate consumption, but the majority was prepared for storage. Despite having no modern refrigerators or freezers, the Inuit developed their own food preservation system. Watching the hunters carefully stack the pieces of seal meat, I asked them where they would store all of it. One hunter replied that they didn't need freezers because they had the entire Arctic. And indeed, this land itself serves as a colossal natural deep freeze. They showed me how to set up a storage cache. They dug holes in the snow or into the permafrost. In the shallow pits, they placed the meat intended for consumption over the next few weeks. The deeper pits were reserved for meat that needed long-term preservation. Without any loss in quality, the meat could stay there for months or even years. During the coldest months, when temperatures drop below -40 degrees Celsius, everything around turns into a natural refrigerator. The meat was wrapped in skins, placed on elevated platforms, and covered with snow. This method protects the meat from scavengers while allowing the intense cold to do its work. One hunter told me that an elder in the village once completely forgot about his meat cache for 2 years. When he eventually rediscovered it, the meat was still perfectly edible. It is hard to imagine doing the same with store-bought meat, which would spoil in just a few days even inside a refrigerator. Some portions of the meat, as they explained to me, are intentionally left to ferment. This is how they create dishes like igunak, a type of fermented meat with an extremely pungent smell and flavor. Not everyone enjoys this dish, but to the Inuit it is considered a true delicacy. Although modern refrigerators have arrived in the Arctic, many hunters still prioritize traditional methods. They require no electricity and, according to local belief, these methods actually make the meat taste better. While observing each piece of meat being placed into its designated spot, I noticed a separate pile that looked quite substantial. I pointed to it and asked who it was for. The hunter replied, "This portion is for the others." The first cuts were sent to the elders. Without a single word or instruction, the hunters themselves wrapped up the choicest parts, the liver, kidneys, and other prized internal organs to give to the oldest members of the village. In a culture where age and wisdom are deeply revered, ensuring that the older generation receives the best food is not just a sign of respect, but a duty. Next, food was brought to families without hunters, widows, single mothers, or those no longer capable of venturing out onto the ice themselves. I watched with my own eyes as a woman and her young children received a large slab of meat without anyone requiring her to ask for a thing. I remarked that they were very generous. My heart filled with admiration for what I had just witnessed. The hunter looked at me with a slightly puzzled expression and replied that it wasn't generosity. He explained that it was simply their way of life, and that the woman's husband would have done the exact same thing for his family. In traditional Inuit society, sharing food is not seen as charity. It is a form of mutual insurance. Today you are lucky enough to catch prey, but tomorrow fortune may not smile upon you. However, if you have shared with others, then on your difficult days they will not let you go hungry. I asked if they ever kept the best cuts for themselves. The hunters glanced at each other and burst into laughter. One of them said, "We are not like you." I didn't quite know if that was a joke or a piece of irony, but I smiled back anyway. What amazed me most was the complete absence of any formal administrative system. There were no lists, no pre-allocated portions, and no weighing or measuring. No one told anyone else whom to give to or how much was enough. Yet everything still unfolded with precision and fairness. Each person instinctively knew what to give to whom and who was in the greatest need at that moment. This was not a temporary or impulsive act of kindness. It was a complex and robust social mechanism, operating without the need for any written rules. As the last pieces of meat were distributed, I realized I had just witnessed an entire way of life. It is this very way of life that has helped these people survive for centuries in the harsh Arctic, a place where people like us might not last even a week. That evening, at my temporary shelter, I watched families prepare different parts of the very seal we had caught. And you know what? Truly, nothing was wasted. The meat was sliced into strips, one portion for dinner, and the rest taken for processing and storage. The seal blubber was cut into small squares. The children ate them with as much delight as if they were eating candy. The bones were cleaned and kept to be made into tools or simmered for broth. Even the seal's eyes, which the host offered to me with a laugh, were considered a delicacy. I pointed to a part I couldn't identify and asked what it was. The host explained that it was reserved specifically for the grandmother of the youngest hunter. He added that I could have it if I wanted, but I hurriedly shook my head in refusal. Clearly, some Arctic delicacies required much more courage than I had brought with me. When I asked if they ever threw anything away, the host looked at me with genuine confusion. He said that nothing is wasted here because everything is earned through hard labor. Waste in this place is not just considered rude, it is something completely unimaginable. And when I finally tasted the seal meat, I understood. This was not merely food. This was a bond with the earth, with ancestors, and with everyone around Every piece of meat here is the result of effort, patience, and knowledge passed down through centuries. If you were to ask me how to catch a 100-kilogram seal without a boat, without guns, and in near total silence, I would now answer with respect, with wisdom, and with a spirit of solidarity. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more fascinating stories about the lives of the Inuit people.